It's officially spring, and many of our students are excited about crossing the finish line and transitioning into a practice-ready nurse. That is our goal for all educators, to ensure that our students are equipped with the resources they need to be successful on the NCLEX exam, as well as being a safe practicing clinician upon graduation. In this snapshot, we're going to be focusing on 3 key strategies that you want to follow to ensure that our nursing students and our postgraduate nurses as well are practice ready. Some of them are going into their first nurse educator job. Many of them are going into their very first nurse job, and some of them may be going into their first leadership role. Whatever transition they're looking to make, we know that we carry a huge responsibility in helping ensure that they are ready for the next phase of their nursing career. Welcome back, everybody, to Dr. Sellars Educate, where our mission is simple. It is to support all nurse educator colleagues to achieve success on the CNE exam or to become a better nurse educator colleague in the classroom and in their community. And that is exactly what we provide right here on our YouTube channel. It is a community of support where like-minded individuals are showing up every single week and reviewing content to help them go to the next level as a nurse educator. If this is the first time you have tuned into our channel, welcome. Make sure you subscribe to our channel so every single time there's a new snapshot released, which happens every week, you will be notified right away. And for those first timers, you may not know that you're expected to print out a study worksheet that's listed right here in the description every time you show up. But if you haven't had a chance to do that, just pull out a sheet of paper and make sure you make a note of 3 things. Number 1, what is today's date? Whatever date you're watching this snapshot, hopefully it's in the spring, but if not, whatever today's date is, we want you to write that down, okay? And second of all, write down what your purpose is for being here. What is the objective? What is the one burning question, perhaps, that you want to get answered today, okay? And then number 3, we want you to think about, as we're going over these concepts, what are your knowledge gaps? What is going to help you take your nurse educator expertise to the next level as a competent nurse educator? Now, if you're already certified, then you're familiar with those 8 competencies for the CNE and CNE novice, and for CNE clinical there are 6 competencies, and that's exactly what we want you to focus on, okay? Are looking at those competencies that are listed on the noln.org website to ensure that you are aware of what your gaps are. And the goal is, by the end of our snapshot today, you will have resources to help you close your knowledge gaps, okay? So that's a little bit of housekeeping for those that are new here. For those returning, welcome back. We are glad that you're here as well. And as you can see, we are springing into action, okay? And what does that mean? Well, it makes sure that we are considering what our current practices are and opportunities for improving it in the classroom. We call it our journey to success, and specifically for this snapshot, we're going to be bringing the 2 mindsets together. One being, where are you on your journey to CNE success? And others, it could be that you are just showing up to become a better nurse educator. But it begins with a roadmap. I've used this analogy with colleagues this week, and I want to share it with you, and you can tell me what you think. Okay, so I am directionally challenged, as many Americans are. And what I find often is when I'm not sure of exactly where I'm going, I use my car navigation, okay? And some may use your phone with a specific app. So whatever navigation tool you're using, you want to go ahead and put in your end location, right? We know where we want to go. We know what we want that end destination to be. We're just not sure how to get there, okay? And that's what a roadmap provides for you. Here at Dr. Sellars Educate, the roadmap we know looks different for everybody, but our endpoint is the same. It is to achieve nurse educator excellence, to be successful on the CNE exam. Okay, so here's what you need to do is be prepared with the right tools. Okay, you only need 2 tools, and that's going to be Billings and Halstead Teaching and Nursing. Right now for the CNE exam, you want to use the 6th edition. But if you've already completed the CNE, or you're just here to learn something new about how you can become a better nurse educator, then certainly you can use the 7th edition. We're actually going to start today in this snapshot giving you page numbers for both resources in case some of you have the 6th edition or the 7th edition. Okay, and then the second resource, if you're on the CNE journey, is going to be Dr. Caputi's 2nd edition CNE review book. These are the only tools that you need in order to be successful on the exam. And you may wonder, how do we know? Well, we have surveyed hundreds of nurse educator colleagues across the country and asked them, what tools did you use? And consistently, this has been their recommendation. We here at Dr. Sellars Educate, me along with the content experts on our advisory board, also use these resources to help us be successful. And then what we would also recommend as a supplement really is the core of the guide that we're talking about, is the detailed test blueprint. Okay, so on the nln.org website, that's where you're going to go to print out that candidate handbook. So coupled with the right resources, the NLN blueprint, and then the support that we provide to you in a number of ways, including our 7-week study plan, this is how you're going to make sure that the destination that you're seeking to reach is one that you are able to achieve. Okay, so we wanted to start there just to remind us all that are here watching this snapshot, the purpose of achieving excellence, the purpose of achieving certification is to get better, a little bit better every single day, to own that responsibility, and then ultimately to help our learners be successful in the classroom. That's what this is all about. All right, so I thought I'd start with something different this time. In the previous snapshot, we introduced cinema education, and in this one, we want to capture the I Love Lucy conveyor belt scenario. Now, if you're not familiar with it, I encourage you to think about some of the strategies we're going to talk about, but I want you to think about how you can apply them in your classroom. Remember that only 5% of content is retained when we only use lecture. We want to engage students in an active learning process in order for them to truly learn. Oftentimes we feel like, oh, I've taught students, I've met the objectives, but my students are still struggling with concepts. Well, that happens, and what we want to do in this snapshot is talk about how can you mitigate that from happening, or at least decrease the likelihood that that will happen. So first, let's take a look at this episode, and then we'll come back together and talk more about the purpose behind it, those 3 key strategies, and there's even more than 3, but we're going to at least have you walk away with 3 to ensure that you are equipped with the information you need to be successful. All right, so here we go. Let's watch this clip.
All right, girls, now this is your last chance. If one piece of candy gets past you and into the packing room unwrapped, you're fired.
Yes, ma'am.
Let her roll!
Well, this is easier. Yeah, we can handle this, okay? Listen, Ethel, I think this... I think we're fighting a losing game. Here she comes.
Fine, you're doing splendidly. Speed it up a little!
Every time I see that clip, it's still hilarious to me. There are so many analogies that you can draw from in that clip. And by the way, you can speed it up if you want it to go a little bit faster. And also there are specific segments of the snapshot or of the 1 minute clip that you can also feature with your students. But we're going to talk about 3 essential elements that are really going to weave into our conversation in this snapshot. First is focusing on the importance of prioritization and delegation. In nursing, we have to work as a team. What I want you to think about is how can you integrate this small clip, it was just 1 minute, into your classroom experiences with your students when you're talking about delegation and prioritization. The next concept we want you to consider is adaptability and creative problem solving. Now, they were pretty creative in finding the locations that they could place the chocolates. It may not have been the most effective place, certainly stuffing them in their mouth. There's limits to that, right? So considering how you can engage students in the focal area of creativity and problem solving to ensure that we are providing making the best decisions possible, okay? And then the third concept I want you to focus on is the consequences of failing to acknowledge overwhelm. We all have competing priorities when it comes to the workloads that we have, even sometimes the challenges that we have with our students, because we know they bring in their life experiences into the classroom. They bring in competing priorities, especially during office hours. There are so many competing priorities that they have, and sometimes it can become overwhelming for us to help students, especially so many students, work through those challenging situations. So I want you to think about what happens whenever we don't raise our hands and ask for help and say, you know what, my plan was to teach this clinical class, but I need to figure out, mentor or administrator, how I can fit this into my schedule. Okay, so advocating for ourselves, speaking up for ourselves, especially if we have a goal to achieve CNE. And we're going to talk about that. How do you integrate that into your already very full plate in an effort to ensure that you are achieving the goals that you have for yourself? So I want you to think about using this clip in the classroom with your students. It is also listed right here in the description. All right, so we always like to start out with our thought-provoking question. So let's take a look at it and see what you think. Lesson plans, enhance instructional coherence and efficacy. What would be the best strategy for the nurse educator aiming to integrate active learning methodologies and robust evaluation techniques into their teaching approach? We have A, embrace pedagogical spontaneity to accommodate diverse student needs and preferences to create an inclusive learning experience. B, utilize educational technology platforms to assist with the creation of lessons to provide standardized content to effectively engage diverse learners. Or C, develop lesson plans promoting active engagement and assessment methods aligning with learning outcomes. Okay, so this is what I want you to consider. With our thought-provoking questions, that's exactly what we want to do. We want to stimulate some thought, trigger, hopefully, some considerations as you think about your 7-week study plan. Okay, so these are the 2 questions we want you to ask yourself every time you see a question on the CNE exam. So first of all, what is this question asking me? Okay, so taking a look again at this question, thinking about what is this question really asking me? Well, I know it's talking about lesson plans. I know that it's talking about coherence and efficacy. I know what that means. And then the second question you want to think about is, what is it that I know for sure about the concepts or the content that is included in this question? Okay, and oftentimes with the STEM, you're going to see a statement or maybe even sometimes a scenario, and then you're going to see the actual question. Okay, so think about what is this question asking you and what is it that you know for sure. So let's talk about learning plans, or we may see them in the literature called lesson plans. Okay, so purposes of your resources, I want you in the 7th edition to turn to page 212. Okay, and this is Billings and Halstead. Okay, and then if you have the 6th edition, you are going to turn to page 182. Okay, so 6th edition, 182 in Billings and Halstead. 7th edition is going to be page 212. These are some best practices that we're going to talk about as it relates to lesson plans or learning plans that you want to consider. And we are intentional in calling them learning plans. And that is because we want to move away from just thinking about a lesson. That is going to imply one directional learning, right? We want it to be a holistic learning plan where there's an exchange of ideas, where students are actively engaged in the learning process. Teaching and learning, we want to happen at the same time, right? We want there to be alignment and congruence. However, when we're so focused on concepts that we want to teach, sometimes we can forget about the exchange of learning that we want to happen. Reflecting on Kolb's experiential learning theory, we know the first step in engaging in that learning process wheel is the actual practice, the hands-on experience that our students are going to have. Now, in the clinical setting, we know that happens. However, in the classroom setting, we want that to happen too. That requires us to engage in application experiences, even in the classroom, such as unfolding case studies. And Chapter 16 in the 6th edition of Billings and Halstead is going to give you an excellent list of pros and cons with each of these evidence-based teaching strategies that you do want to take some time to look at as well. Okay, so what else do we want to know about our learning plan? First is going to be, what are our goals? Think about short-term and long-term. Okay, what are the goals that we want to achieve as part of this lesson learning plan that we are engaging in? And then we want to fit it into our schedule. Monday, perhaps you can think about, and this is for the next week, what are those weekly objectives and how have I aligned them with the content? And then on Tuesday, you can start to think about those teaching strategies and alignment. Now, this is an example. Of course, if you're able to do this all in one day, great. But remember, our focus is to decrease overwhelm, to decrease anxiety. And this is one way to be able to come back and have a fresh perspective in looking at the learning plans for next week, okay? And this can be something as simple as you doing this for each class all on one day. And then the other element I want you to consider is thinking about the CNE exam in the same mindset. Okay, so let's take a look as an example. You could think about on Monday, what is my objective for my specific competency this week? Okay, so it could be that curriculum is a gap area for you. So you've decided, you know what, on Monday, I'm going to carve out 6 hours for the week, for next week, so that I can focus on curriculum as an example. And then Tuesday, you could think about what teaching strategies align with what the evidence says I should be using as part of a curriculum or my learning plan to align with what Billings and Halstead says and Dr. Caputi's review book says as well. Okay, so you can see with this learning schedule, you can easily incorporate your CNE pathway to success, your journey to success, and also what your actual learning plans are going to be with your students. And then Wednesday, you want to focus on active engagement activities. How am I going to involve my students in the learning process? How am I aligning my evidence-based teaching strategies and engagement activities with the content that I am focusing on? Again, mapping back to those objectives that I have outlined for my students to be able to achieve. And then Thursday, now that you've carved out the objectives, you've identified and aligned your teaching strategies, you've also processed how am I going to actively engage my students? Am I creating learning circles? Is it a flipped classroom? Is it a ticket to class? What are those active learning strategies going to look like with my students? And Thursday, I want to think about, okay, so what is it that I need to review? Are there textbook readings I need to engage in or complete? Do I need to do a literature review and looking at what to be confident in our ability to provide this information to our students? If it's a gap area for us, then that's when you want to consider, do I bring in supplemental resources? That could be a guest lecture, or that could be something as simple as a video, or even textbook resources, those supplemental resources that are often available from our textbook vendors. Perhaps there's a resource there. Okay, so understanding where our gaps are as it relates to our objectives is another really important assessment that we want to do. And then on Friday, you could identify, how am I going to validate that learning has happened with my students? And you want to make sure you align those evidence-based evaluation strategies with those learning objectives. And then Saturday, we want you to rest and reflect. Okay, I know that can be a challenge to do, but this is a great learning schedule for you to think about as you are building on your lesson plans and what your strategies are going to be to ensure that we are aligning our evidence-based teaching strategies with the learning objectives and how we are engaging our learners through this process. Okay, so I'm curious to know, I know not everybody's going to watch this live when it's released, but I'm curious to know. So go ahead and comment or send us an email, info@drsellarseducate.com. How closely aligned is this learning schedule or this learning plan with what you do every week? And what do you think about giving it a try just for 1 week to see how it goes? So how inclined are you to do that? Again, I want you to think about not only how this is going to help you with your learning plans that you're creating for your own content in your course, but also as you're moving forward on your CNE journey. All right, and then as we transition into our last couple of slides, think about study time. Well, not only just study time, but productive, effective study time. And this is specific for the CNE exam, or it could be as you're thinking about what concepts you need to better comprehend related to the learning objectives. 64%, that was the success rate for colleagues that took the exam in 2022. We don't have the data on 2023 yet, but this is what we already know. When it comes to dedicated time to focus on these competencies, there are 63 competencies underneath, or 63 sub-competencies underneath the 8 competencies. I know everybody was a little bit anxious. I was checking to see who was paying attention. But there are 8 competencies and there are 63 sub-competencies or behaviors or knowledge statements underneath the total of the 8 competencies. Okay, so you want to make sure you spend time going through all 63 knowledge statements or competencies, competency behaviors, to ensure that you are knowledgeable about these expectations as it relates to the CNE exam. All right, so let's take a look at the thought-provoking question and see if everyone chose C. Develop lesson plans promoting active engagement and assessment methods aligning with learning outcomes. If that was your choice, you are correct. All right, so let's talk a little bit about why A and B are not correct. So A says embracing pedagogical spontaneity to accommodate diverse student needs. That sounds pretty good, right? To include an inclusive learning experience. That all sounds great. However, think about what the question is asking. It says, what would be the best strategy for the nurse educator that's aiming to integrate active learning methodologies? Well, yes, we want to embrace pedagogical spontaneity, but it really doesn't give us specific strategies, right? This is more of a mindset, more of a framework. And then let's take a look at B. It says utilize educational technology platforms. Well, that's one element that we could use to provide an active learning methodology or active learning strategy, but it's not a holistic approach. C really is the best holistic approach when we think about the question, which is our goal of engaging in active learning strategies in the classroom as well as evaluation techniques. So this is why C is going to be the best answer, because it's going to be the most holistic answer when we think about how to actively engage our learners in the classroom experiences. This is about a transformation. We want you to think differently when you show up in the classroom. 1% improvement, that's our goal every single day as we're engaging with our students to help them achieve success, to help them also be practice-ready nurses, practice-ready clinicians once they complete our nursing programs. So this is going to end our snapshot for this series. We hope this information has been helpful. Feel free to reach out if you have questions, and we're looking forward to seeing so many of you at the ATI conference in Salt Lake next month, which is April 2024. And we are delighted to also hear that some of you will be joining us at the Grandover Resort in Greensboro, North Carolina, May 16th and 17th of 2024, as we engage in a pre-session on competency-based education, as well as a full-day masterclass for CNE, CNECL, and CNE Novice. So this is our annual masterclass in person that we provide. You can find all the information right here by scanning the QR code, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Have a great one, everybody.